So I'm going to start with an overview about owls and even touch on some evolutionary stuff real quick, and then go into the owls that are most common around here. Mostly I'll be speaking about the nocturnal forest owls. We do have a few other owls that you might see more during the day that I'll mention. And then about the surveys, what we found out last year, we got some pretty cool results, and a little bit about the surveys this year. All right, so to give a basic overview about owls, there are two scientific families. The true owls and the barn owls. And we don't have barn owls around here, but they're pretty familiar in pictures of owls. So there's 220 to 225 living species of owls, and they're found everywhere except Antarctica, most of Greenland, and some remote islands. So pretty widespread. The smallest owl is an elf owl, only weighs 1 ounce, and the largest is a Eurasian eagle owl that can weigh 10 pounds. So we have a widespread of sizes of owls. A quick evolutionary trip through time. It's one of the oldest vertebrate species. So the first owl fossil was found, is from about 60 million years ago. It was dug up around Colorado. So the Titonidae family species, which are the barn owls, are a little bit older than the true owls, and there's fossils from about 50 million years ago in North America and France. So owls have been around for quite a long time, and you can find them a lot in mythology and lore, and that's really interesting to me that they're so interwoven with a lot of those stories. In ancient Greece and Rome, the first mention of owls was in around 200 BC, and they were even on coins in Athens. In the Middle Ages, they were, that's when like the evil, eerie owl came into existence, that whole notion that owls are, nocturnal predators and we should fear them. But a lot of what we see about owls now is as a symbol of wisdom. We can also see them a lot in pretty much every single Alaskan Native culture. I was able to even come across an Eyak story that was in a De Laguna book from the 1920s. It's a story about how a young boy was crying, and he was told that he shouldn't cry, and the owl will get him if he does not stop crying. And he didn't stop crying, and the owl came down and got him, and he was never seen again. So,
lesson there.
So that's just a quick, the whole more history about owls in a different way. But owls, moving into more about the physical features of owls and how they do what they do. So they are mainly nocturnal predators. They have hooked bills and sharp talons, and that's how they catch their food and eat it. So mostly they'll eat small mammals, larger insects, small birds. So the smaller owls will typically eat smaller prey. Larger owls can eat larger prey. There are videos of owls attacking small dogs and things like that you can find all over YouTube. I don't have any of those tonight. And they regurgitate indigestible parts of their prey in pellets. So you can find full skeletons of small mammals and other things in owl pellets. Most owls, or all owls, will nest in tree cavities or old nests of other animals. Smaller owls typically will nest in tree cavities. Larger owls mostly in nests of like old eagle's nests, things like that. And they're typically monogamous. So another thing I don't have written up there is that owls, one of the ways that they are successful in being a nocturnal predator is through pretty much silent flight. So this picture on the bottom is of an owl feather that the edges are serrated. So as they flap their wings, the air goes through and doesn't create a sound of the air like whooshing over the wing. And that's how they can sneak up on their prey. One of the ways, anyway. So just pictures of nests, a great horned owl in an old abandoned nest, and a boreal owl, which is a smaller owl, nesting in a tree cavity. And smaller owls will also use nest boxes, which we used to have around here. There might be a few still around. But owls like saw-whet owls and boreal owls are mostly the ones that would use those. So their feet and talons, how they'll catch their prey, and you can see on this in this image on the left, almost a Velcro-like surface on the bottom of their feet. And actually, Charlotte Westing from Fish and Game brought some frozen owls that we can take a look at a little bit later at the end of the talk and see if we could see that. So that's how they'll pick up their prey. They get better grip on prey and on perches and that Velcro-like grip. Not to mention their sharp talons that can easily pick up prey. And then they have a flexible joint that, so when they're, so normally they'll have 3 toes in front and 1 in back, but they can swivel 1 to the back, so it's 2 in front and 2 in back. That gives them a better grip on prey when they are snatching it off the ground. And hearing and vision. So another way that they're extremely successful as nocturnal predators, they can see really well at night, and they actually cannot move their eyes. So that's why you see all the images and cartoons about owls swiveling their heads all the way around. They can swivel their heads 270 degrees, and they can hear sounds 10 times fainter than what humans can hear. And one of the ways they do this, and I think this is really cool, is they have ear holes that are asymmetrical. So it'd be like one ear up here and one ear down here. And what they'll do is the sounds of prey will basically reach their ears at like a split-second difference. And so they'll turn their head to equalize that sound, and when the sound hits both their ears at the same time, they're looking directly where their prey is. And then they have facial discs of feathers that will direct sounds toward their ear holes to help them hear even better. So cool ways that owls can find things in the dark. And because they're out mostly at night, with the exception of a couple owls, it's very uncommon to see them, but you can hear them, especially around here. If you go out at night in spring, late, well, for us, it would be very early spring, late winter, and if you're not making a lot of noise, chances are you will hear owls, because they call for a lot of different reasons. Identification. In the spring, it's a lot of territorial calls, and attracting a mate, pair bond, locating each other, and their young will call to express alarm. They'll call if they're hungry. So, getting more into what owls do we have around here and what are we most likely to see and hear. There's 10 species of owls in Alaska, and there are 7 documented species in this area. Over the years, whether it be anecdotally or more formal documentation, northern saw-whet, boreal, great horned, western screech, and those are the ones I'm going to talk about the most. But there's also been sightings of snowy owls. I think, Milo, you guys last year saw a few snowy owls.
We've seen one a number of times on the top of the Heaney Range, and maybe some snowmobilers. Robert, you ever get to
down at the southern end of the Heaney Range.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one owl that has wintered there for a number of years, but there's fairly regular sightings from the south end of the Heaney Range.
Very
got
cool.
one in my cooler.
And in coolers. And in Charlotte's freezer. Pretty regular.
And then there's more daytime owls, short-eared owls, which we had a ton of this summer out on the Delta, and northern hawk owls, which can sometimes see around. So the northern saw-whet owl, and I have all their calls too that we can access at the end. But it's the smallest one we have around here, so it's only 7.5 to 8 inches tall. It's a little tiny guy. Nests in tree cavities. Has the prominent white V on the face, right between the eyes, and a dark bill. So they'll start nesting in March and early May. I've heard that people can hear them pretty commonly around here. We actually didn't catch a lot last year for the surveys. I think only a couple. But they eat small mammals like redback voles. They can live around 10 years in the wild, so fairly long-lived as compared to some other species. And they usually initiate their nests in March to early May, so that's around the time that you'll hear them calling the most. It's a good time to be out surveying for them. And so that's actually exactly when we will be surveying for them. Boreal owl. This is a little bigger. It looks a lot like a saw-whet owl, but it has a dark V or darker V instead of the lighter one. Its call is often confused with a snipe. So, are you guys familiar with the snipe call at all? So this is one of the things when I did owl surveys last year. When I thought for the first time I wasn't sure if it was boreal owl or snipe, I actually got a recording when I was with Sue Farzan, and it was confirmed that it was a boreal owl, which is super cool. They nest in tree cavities. So interesting fact about the boreal owl, they show the most extreme reverse sexual dimorphism. So the female is noticeably larger than the male. For all owls, females are larger than males, but very much so for boreal owls. They eat small mammals, and a breeding male lifespan is only 3.5 years, so considerably less than the potential lifespan for a saw-whet owl.
How big is the male?
I would imagine that the male is probably, I would have to look it up to know exactly, but I would imagine that the male is probably still slightly larger than a saw-whet, but I don't know how large the female can get, but I can find out. Great horned owls. So the most common owl to hear around here and see. Last year there were a bunch of reports of great horned owls on Whiteshed, in town, all over the place. So they're the largest owl that we'll typically find around here. Considerably larger than the first two owls, 18 to 25 inches tall. And a lot of people know them because they have prominent ear tufts. Not ears, but their feathers. So they'll nest in abandoned nests, sometimes tree cavities, but they're fairly large, so fitting in a tree cavity would be kind of hard. They start calling. The earliest of owls, you can hear them in February, possibly even earlier. It's been a pretty mild winter, so they'll definitely be the ones you'll start hearing call first out at night. They are highly territorial, and they don't tolerate pretty much any other owl in their territory, as some other ones, mostly like boreal and saw-whet owls, will. They're long-lived, about 20 years, and you can start hearing their vocalizations. You can hear them calling in January through April. We heard them throughout the entire survey period last year, pretty consistently. And another smaller owl is the screech owl, which they're small, 8.5 inches tall. They also have ear tufts. They simulate dead tree branches when they're startled, which I was talking to someone the other day, like in my mind it'd be like that they would go like this and be like branches, but I'm pretty sure they just stay still. But that'd be way better if they did that.
They get a real erect posture and their tufts go up.
They don't stick a wing out.
Yeah.
They nest in tree cavities or old woodpecker holes. They're little. They can fit in smaller areas, smaller spaces. We're at the very northernmost part of their range. It's actually written in a lot of records that Cordova is the farthest north and west part of their range. And they'll defend territories year-round, but they'll call the most during breeding season, so March, April, right around there. And what we're also looking for, specifically in the owl surveys, is the barred owl, which has not been documented here, but they have been rapidly expanding on their range in the past 60 years, probably even longer, but most rapidly in the past 60 years. Their population in the southeast doubled from 1985 to 2008, and they've been found as far north as Skagway in the previous surveys they did in southeast. So they're slightly smaller than a great horned owl, but they are strongly territorial, and they will fly in to investigate somebody else if another owl is calling. And so we monitored last year to see if we could pick them up, because they are aggressive and can outcompete a lot of other bird species, larger avian predators, smaller owls. So it's important to know if they're in the area, especially if they're just coming into the area, to watch out for any management concerns. Farther south, in the range of spotted owls, it's a huge management concern, which some of you may have heard about, where they're actually killing barred owls to save the spotted owl, because they'll interbreed and outcompete spotted owls. So, all right. So to kind of move into more about owl surveys, I skipped. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, so why survey owls? And it's primarily for a need to gain information. There's not a lot known about owls. They're nocturnal, they're rare, they're more elusive, and especially in Alaska, we don't have a lot of roads. It's harder to monitor them and really get an accurate count of how many there are. Expanding ranges for species like the barred owl. Also just for this area, it's establishing baseline data. Not a lot of surveys have been done for owls. A lot of the owl accounts or species accounts are more anecdotal and can determine future population trends, any management if that's necessary, and just learning more about them. They're pretty interesting animals that you don't really get to see or hear too often. So, specifically the surveys we did last year and some results. So we had 5 road routes, some of which were inaccessible because for most part of the winter there was not a lot of snow, and then right before the survey started it was snowing like crazy, so we were unable to access certain parts of the routes, but that was okay, it worked out. It's a 6-week period from March 15th to April 26th. We had a total of 16 owl detections of 4 species. So we had northern saw-whet owls. I think there were 2 detections of those. There's 1 boreal owl, a few screech owls, and a lot of great horned owl detections. Over the course of the 6 weeks, we stopped at 71 points, and so we hit every single route 3 times, in the 5 routes, and we had owl detections along Powder Creek Road and Copper River Highway. And the other routes, which I think I have on a slide coming up, we also surveyed Whiteshed and Orca roads, and it was really surprising that we didn't get anything on Whiteshed, because I got a lot of reports of owls on Whiteshed, but never when we were out there. So these are just like a visual of the routes. And so visual of the owls we saw, and I'll break it down just so you could see their distribution of where we heard them, because some, like the screech owl, which are these red dots up here on the left, they're only heard along Powder Creek at the same 3 points every single time. Only owls heard out there and heard it every single time we surveyed. And only 1 boreal owl. So those are screech owls. A bunch of great horned owls out the road. So there's the airport. So airport pretty much out to McKinley. This one only shows 1. Oh, we had 1 actual saw-whet owl detected and 1 that was a maybe, just past the airport. And the only boreal owl one was right across from Alleganic Slough Road, and that's actually funny story, because I was out with Sue that night, and so we had like geese. The duskies had just arrived on the delta. Couldn't hear anything because there's so many geese. The hooligan were running, so we had eagles swooping down over our heads. We're like, this is crazy. And then there was a big party going on, and there was like people driving back and forth, and they're like, what are you guys doing? We're like, shh, shh. And right after we had a bunch of people drive past, we got the boreal owl. So that was unexpected. Very cool. So, most of our detections were March 30th to April 12th. And I did mention that the only owl detected along Power Creek was the western screech owl, and they were the only screech owls heard. Surprises, no owl was heard along Whiteshed. 69% were detected during the broadcast portion of the surveys. So we do silent listening and we play the calls and listen after the calls. So there was about 30% of owls that were just calling on their own without broadcasting for them, but most of them responded to broadcast. And then most of the owls were heard pretty shortly after sunset, 1 to 2 hours after sunset. I don't think we had any detections after about 3 hours. We also really weren't usually out very late, so that may have had something to do with it. We heard some cranes, eagles, snipe, and we saw some moose. So just all around cool to get out at night and kind of hear and see these things. And we will be doing owl surveys again this year, gearing up for that right now. And they're scheduled for March 24th through May 6th. And they're going to be pretty much similar to what we did last year. And what we did was mostly based on volunteers, citizen science, and we kind of just played it by ear. There's, we have the number of routes that we have to monitor, and everyone kind of gave me their schedules. We looked at what would happen with the weather, and a day or two before, if the weather looked good, I would give people a call. Because we didn't go out if it was snowing really hard, if it was raining hard, or blowing hard. So we had a lot of good conditions last spring. We survey each route 3 times and begin 30 minutes after sunset, which is not so bad at the end of March. The beginning of May, we'll be out pretty late. And the routes will take approximately 2 to 4 hours to complete. I'm combining routes this year because I had 5 routes last year, going down to 3 to combine ones. Like the Orca Road route was only 2 stops, so we'd be done in like 45 minutes. So combining things so that more effort for each time we're out, because we might have limited weather windows. And I did mention we use broadcast to increase the detection of owls. And so broadcast is basically, like I said, just playing owl calls. And there is a little bit of controversy about that, but owls are rare. They're very low density. And so to get an accurate number of how many might live around here, it's important that we can use owl calls to do that, because it increases the possibility of detecting an owl. Really used in these ways, it has minimal effects. We're not out there playing calls all night long. We're playing a couple of calls and moving on. And we broadcast in order of owl size, so the smallest to largest, and that's so that we're not calling in larger owls that might prey on a smaller owl that we'd call in next. That's not an intention. So benefits to you if you participate are to hear and or see some species that are typically more elusive, making an important contribution to local science, being the first person to detect a barred owl this far north, and it's super fun to go out and listen for owls at night. I think I met so many great people last year and had so many excellent conversations and just had a blast. It was really fun. So if you are interested, talk to me tonight. We'll do a brief training session just to go over protocols and owl calls early March. Surveys run based on weather, and we're going to start March 24th. And thank you.
Yeah, that was really, really good. I'm curious, so do you go along on every survey and do you use a Forest Service vehicle or how does that part work?
And I did go along on every survey last year, and we used personal vehicles. And this year, if I have people from that I went out with last year or who are fairly confident in their abilities to identify owls, I would feel comfortable having people go out without me. But it's personal vehicles. I supply things like any data sheets, the caller, to do the broadcast, any other things you need to like record temperature and things like that. But if you don't have a vehicle, and you'd really like to do this, there are, nobody goes out by themselves. It's always 2 to 4 people. So there's always somebody.
And can you explain a little bit more? You play the broadcast and then you have a flashlight or what to see if they come in?
Nope, it's all just by their calls and by vocalizations. So when we get to each point, it's 2 minutes of silent listening to see if any owls are calling on their own. And then we play, how we did last year, which I'll probably keep it the same this year, is 30 seconds of a boreal owl call, followed by a minute of silent listening, 30 seconds of the boreal owl call, silent listen, and then do the same with a screech owl call. And then the last one is a barred owl, and we wait a little bit longer at the end because they take a little bit longer to respond. But it's all just based on their vocalizations and logging every single owl we hear, whether or not we're actually broadcasting for it. Any other questions?
Is just the 3 owls equal?
Yes, because great horned owls, we don't call for them because we know that they're pretty common on the landscape and they call a lot on their own. So we can pretty much log them if they're present. And saw-whet owls will typically, it's been shown that they respond to boreal owl calls, but the reverse is not true. So if we play the boreal owl call, we'll also increase the likelihood of hearing a saw-whet owl at the same time. So, and that covers most of the ones that we expect to hear around here. I guess I didn't really end up touching on the other 2 owls that you see a lot during the day, short-eared owls, which are migratory, so they're not here in the winter. But we do have northern hawk owls that you might see in the winter mostly, or a lot during the day. They'll hunt during the day as well. Any other questions?
Do you take information at any other time? So if during your survey someone happens to see them or hear something, do you take that information into account?
Absolutely. I think last year I would occasionally get calls and emails from people that had seen owls. There was an injured owl in town. I got a call about that. Things like that. Just and I keep note of that, especially when we're running routes through those areas too. But yeah, that is great information that I do keep track of.
How many great horned owls were heard last year?
Let me think. I think we had 8. I think it was 50% of our detections, so we heard them 8 times.
Do you think it's anything to do with like snowshoe hare populations? Like last year and this year's been really low rabbit ears. Is there any?
I don't know if there's
any connection there.
There might be because they do hunt snowshoe hare. So I don't think I've ever seen anything specifically about it, but I would say just based on on my knowledge of the subject that that's possible.